Is this for SOS?
Exactly
This is for Harmony Central.
Harmony Central.
But it may show up other places, you never know. Brian, lead the discussion.
First, just so you know,
And
Craig
talk loud.
Okay, Craig is the main cat at HarmonyCentral.com. Harmony Central gets what? A couple of million hits a month?
More.
Something crazy like, okay. So knowing that the university was sending me out here, I said, well, look, I'm going to get in contact with manufacturers and my heroes to talk to, since I have this opportunity to do this thing.
So you're waiting for your heroes to come in?
Well, they're all here, so I'm waiting for you to...
We're the manufacturers, so
We're the manufacturers. We manufacture music.
We manufacture music, baby, you know what I'm saying?
I didn't expect to get George, didn't expect to get Stanley, didn't expect to get Alan. I knew Lenny was coming, but Lenny comes through with Stanley.
I brought
George
everything
happens to
in.
be
This is my magnetism.
So what's happening is I just want to talk to everybody and give everybody a chance to just tell that whole community, that whole Harmony Central community, what you're doing. We're just going to just talk, for as much time as you guys have. And
When I do leave, we're going to be racially incorrect.
Yeah.
Imbalance.
Yeah.
Look forward to that.
Yeah. We have a lot of fun over there.
Okay. Well, so it'll just go where it goes.
Yeah.
And here we go. All right. 1, 2, 3. Hey, this is Hardgroove. Hello to Harmony Central. Hardgroove from the mighty Public Enemy and all of that stuff. And I'm here with my heroes and more. All right. We're here at NAMM 2013. We have Mr. Alan Parsons. We have Mr. Stanley Clarke, Mr. George Duke, and Mr. Lenny White, who my mom says looks just like me.
Well, I don't know about that.
My mother said that, so I have to ask her questions about what's been going on in her life. We've been here, but I've been checking out a lot of conferences and all kinds of stuff, and it's all been very interesting. And the most consistent thing that's been coming up is where music is, and where music is going. And I've grown up listening to all of these guys' work, and everyone has something very interesting to say about that. But this MIDI conference was very interesting. And I'd like to ask Alan Parsons, because we were talking about, or George and Alan was talking about, the impact of MIDI and the viewpoint of musicians using MIDI and the threat or the creative use of MIDI with musicians. I'd like to get Alan's thoughts on that one more time.
Well, MIDI, there's no question that MIDI changed all our lives. I mean, until the mid-80s, we were fighting with synthesizers to duplicate a sound. I mean, George brought this up in the panel. You had to literally make chalk marks with a pen to get all the knobs in the right place and even get something near what you'd created yesterday. But MIDI came along, and you could not only store note information and sequences, but you could also store settings on a synth, and that was revolutionary. The idea that you could call up a whole bunch of different sounds and duplicate them. That was a major thing. It's come a long way. MIDI's from MIDI sequencing, we went to hard disk recording. Arguably, one would have not necessarily happened without the other. And I think we've reached the stage where it's hard to imagine it going any further than it has really. I mean, as a technology. But what's wonderful about it, and the credit must go to Dave Smith for this, we're still on the original MIDI spec from 1982, 1983, version 1.0. It's still there, and we're still using it. It's amazing.
Now, in the course of the conversation, when you guys start talking about one cat sitting and playing keys and playing the bass lines and I've always had an issue with that, simply because I didn't play piano. But the advent of MIDI and all that sequencer technology allowed me to get out ideas that I was shocked at. I was shocked when I played ding, 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 ding. It sounded well, didn't sound like George, but it was inspired by things I've heard George play, and I'm like, oh, I had those ideas in my head. And part of what I was dealing with was some of the cats, some of the heads. You guys know Weldon Irvine, Weldon
Sure.
was a very good friend of mine. He used to do his workshops right around the corner from my house. Weldon was really, really cool. Some of the other cats that I knew made me afraid to like sort of like express my musical ideas because I wasn't as good as a lot of cats. But having that technology allowed me to express myself, as Craig Anderton was mentioning. And
That's the good point. You see, the fact is, if you're afraid of something because of when you put something a tool that's as great as MIDI in the hands of creative musicians, things start to blossom.
Right.
It's when it gets into the hands of mediocre people that maybe the music starts changing.
Mediocre.
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 It's a new term.
Yes, sir.
That's a good idea.
But you know, Stanley and I were walking through the NAMM show. We were talking about it. And he said to me, man, it's totally changed. I mean, will it ever get back to where it was with people really creating music? Because now the paradigm has shifted to a point where we don't know what it's actually going to be. But as long as there are creative people, there are always going to be creative people doing things. And so there'll be creative people finding creative ways to make new music.
Now that point leads to the assault that I've gotten for all my years in Public Enemy. In PE, there were no musicians. I was the first one when Chuck asked me to join. I was the first player, okay? And then we put together this trio to perform all of these tunes with sometimes with backing tracks and sometimes without. I had to sit down and figure out what was the music in here. You know, oh well, there's some organized chaos. Those guys put no. The main cat, Eric Sadler, was actually a bass player. So there was music in there. I heard the music. I remember when Herbie said to me once, in New York, he said, I love what you guys do. I love what you guys doing. I said, well, there are players. I mean, there are heads out.
You sat in and played with them.
Yeah,
Public Enemy?
in
Oh, yeah,
Philly.
yeah, in Philly, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what, man? You know, when the word create, you know, like I think it gets associated with so many different things. But when you just look at the basic definition of it, and I think it's the idea of creation has been redefined because someone can actually sit down and think of sampling George, and that could be considered a creative act. You know, like so. I mean, from my time and Lenny's time and hell, all you guys. I mean, the idea is, you know.
None of us are getting any younger.
Yeah, you know, it's like creating music is like you sit down, you get an instrument, and you play. But you know, now it's a whole different thing, and I believe that with the introduction of MIDI and all the other things, I think you could honestly say that it really has empowered musicians and even people that maybe didn't grow up studying music traditionally. And I think it's a big thing for me, believe it or not, man. When I listen to, say, my son's music that he likes, he's a hip hop fanatic, you know, and it's taken a lot for me to change and because really there's really nothing wrong with any of it. It just depends on your standards and you know George has a standard and but there's really, in reality, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, we're all creators, and whatever someone creates, it's valid. Yeah, as they say, under God. But you know, it's you know. So I mean, to just answer your question, I mean, you know, going back to MIDI, I think MIDI is just one of the host of all the many things that have come out that have empowered musicians. I mean, the greatest thing I think out of all this stuff is that you actually can sit at home. Say you're a film composer. I've done a lot of films. Man, before MIDI, forget it. I mean, I've done a lot of films sitting home and doing stuff, and yes, it has forced me in a really interesting way to think of things and create things that I would never come up with just a bass. I'm sitting there with an acoustic bass, and believe me, it would have never come up. Never.
It's a good tool put in the hands of creative people. They find different ways to create.
It's all, it's all good. It's all good.
Well, you know,
And you just call up a thing, 30-piece strings, poof, done.
well, there's a comment you made on your DVD about MIDI being in the DNA of virtually every pop production of the last however many years.
Yeah.
And I think, to your point, it has so many different identities. I mean, what would you say is the main way that you use MIDI? Or is there even a main way? Or is it just everywhere?
I'm using it for automated mixing. I'm using it for MIDI sequencing, for changing a sound. You know, recording something in MIDI and deciding I don't like that sound. I'd rather have that sound. And that's a big advantage. That's something we weren't able to do at one time.
You know, can I tell you a story? I was on a stage at Herbie Hancock, Carlos Santana, Jean Lucien. We were up at the Greek Theater in San Francisco, and I believe this is when they first bought the DX7 over, and they bought it and gave it to Herbie. Right? So it was a keyboard. It was a keyboard. Then there was a box, like a little like keyboard about the size of this, was on the side, and then there was another keyboard, and I had never even envisioned playing one keyboard and you hear another sound. So this guy does this to it, and I think it was monophonic, like one sound. So Herbie went, bump, and I kid you not, Carlos went off the ground about that. I went back like this, you know. Jean Lucien was like he had smoking some good stuff. And I mean, it was really, it was an amazing thing to see that, to actually see that. It was at the Greek Theater. That's a really vivid memory in my mind of that. You know, that's the beginning of MIDI for me. I tell you, I just thought, wow, this is amazing. I didn't even know. I mean, I just hadn't thought of at that point like where that's going to take us. You know, the DX7, and you know, which we could never figure out how to tune. Remember that?
No, it's an amazing technology in MIDI. I think it changed my life, and I love orchestrating. I can be the whole orchestra, or any band, any instrument. But like I was saying on this panel earlier today, I think there's a balance that needs to be struck. But from its infancy, I was enamored with the sound of being able to do all of this, and I went there. I mean, really went there, and I forgot all about live musicians. And I started listening back to some stuff that I did. I said, man, this does not sound right. With me being every instrument, because I wasn't thinking like a bass player, thinking like a drummer, thinking like a guitarist, whatever I was doing. I had to reorient that and say, okay, sometimes I just do MIDI sequences or whatever with analog instruments, whatever, and then replace it later with real players, because I want that organic thing happening. And I think that's the dilemma for musicians, to try to find a balance where you have something that's organic, because there are not a lot of musicians playing together now. It's just one cat in the room and you get one basically idea, you know, unless in the hands of someone that's really adept at it and a professor, you know, can.
Was it Craig that said uninvent quantize today?
Yeah.
I think that was a
Well, you know, there's one thing I like to say about it. And then all you guys have been around longer than me, and I grew up listening to your stuff. And I think there is a truth to and not in religious terms, but a truth to the spiritual nature of music. Okay, and that's essentially what you're talking about. When that's gone, we notice it. But there's a reality to the young folks today who don't know this.
Yeah,
and so some folks will get up, and I think some of the guys at the conference were starting to get towards that, with criticizing what young people don't know. And we can't make that mistake of criticizing what young people don't know, because they don't know. And we say, well, they don't know. The thing is, while we're all still here, it's my job. It's my job. Alan Parsons has to leave. He's going to the dark side of the moon, but we'll see another time. Okay.
Sorry, got to go. I've got an appearance on a stand. I've got to sign autographs.
Thanks so much, Alan. Okay, I'll keep up this point.
Thank you for having me as the token white guy.
You're white?
So my job is to, as a fan of such powerful players who are still around and still valid and still vital, my job is to expose to young people what it is I grew up on.
We've all taken that responsibility because of the fact that it is responsibility of what it is that we do in our music, that we have taken younger musicians and sort of been mentors to them, because I mean, if we value our music, then we have to teach it from the standpoint of the young people that play it, so they represent the music the right way.
Right.
And so we've all done that, and I think that's part of our responsibility to do that, so that we keep the music right, and it's represented the right way.
And it depends on what your goal is too, what you're trying to accomplish.
Yes.
You know, what they're trying to accomplish. They may not be thinking about that.
Just
They may be
making some
thinking
money.
this is the next dollar. I'm trying to get paid. But then on the other hand, generally musicians like us, you know, try to create music from a different standpoint, because I personally believe, like you, that music is at its best is created spiritually. It's conceived and performed that way and executed that way.
And it's taken us how many years to find our resonance as a species with harmonies so that it works a certain way?
Yeah.
To just throw that out and just say, oh, well, I'm going to create this because I can do, you know.
Right.
You know, you're throwing something out.
I remember when George got his synclavier. He actually got really, really good at putting stuff together, and it would really sound like guys together. You know, you'd have to really listen close. You know, but I do remember him having some stuff together. Then he'd bring some guys in to play on top.
Better now.
And you're even better now. See, shit, I mean, he might not have had a musician on his record in the last 10 years. I don't know, but you know, but I do remember that. I mean, it was really some guys. You know, I think some of the better, more intuitive musicians that have been around and heard a lot of drummers and bass players, you know, can take those things and you can put those little factors into your music, and it can get very, very close, you know. But there's nothing like real guys.
No.
Nothing like it.
It's the real deal. You have to touch.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna have to wrap it up.
All right.
There's another thing happening here, but
Yes,
I
sir.
really appreciate you guys coming. Mr.
Yeah.
Stanley Clarke,
Take care, my friend.
George Duke,
All right, man.
Mr. Lenny White.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it's Hardgroove signing off from NAMM 2013 for myself, for Harmony Central, and for Santa Fe University of Art and Design. See you next time.